Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts thinks mini camp is when Chihuahuas go to doggy daycare. That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. He's not part Chihuahua, or he might be, but it's actually a small part, which is kind of shocking if you look at him. Today is part 2 of my X-Factors series. Last week, we did X-Factors for the AFC. This week, we are doing it for every NFC team. So happy to be joined for the second time now by Marshall Newhouse. Welcome back to the show. The people demanded it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, keep spamming your email or your comments and get me back on the show. I appreciate it. But yeah, thanks for having me.
I really like doing this podcast just to explain people what we're doing. If you missed last week's or you've missed it the last few years that I've been doing it, the exercise is pretty simple. We look at every team. This time in the NFC, and we try to pick a player who we think could be an X factor that could determine whether or not the season is successful for the team. And I say that specifically. Oh, by the way, I should add, it's not quarterbacks, because you could pick the quarterback for every team. It's not coaches also. I think some of these you could also pick a coach. I want to be clear, though. I say to determine if the season is successful because, Marshall, I would argue that different teams have very different parameters for what success is.
Yeah, definitely. And you talk about teams that missed the playoffs or had a lot of turnover. I mean, a lot of quarterback movement. I think this is one of the bigger off seasons for quarterback movement, both in free agency and with the new draft class. So a lot of things that are unknowns for teams, and they're going to be looking for you call them X factors, but just breakout players or guys that maybe got paid and we need them to come through even more to secure their side of the ball or the best thing that this team has to offer. And so these are a lot of transitionary periods, a lot of coaches with last swing at bat who've got to figure something out, whether that's playoffs, whatever their threshold is for job security, they've got to figure it out. And so a lot of things are in play. And, sometimes we forget that football is the ultimate team sport, but these individual matchups matter on a granular basis, game to game, week to week, and they are the difference between winning and losing in this league. The margins are so thin.
Yeah, sometimes when I do this, because you can't choose quarterback, I do feel like I end up choosing proxies for quarterback play. But when it is about the quarterback, it often ends up being, okay, who is a player who's maybe pivotal to the quarterback's success if this player plays at a high level? Although I will say, I'm looking at the players I chose, and it's a lot of defense this year on some of these teams, particularly in the NFC West, which is where I think I want to start because I feel like the NFC West always gets the short shrift in divisional runarounds, and for some reason it's always last. I guess
Pacific Northwest, we forget about them. It's just a common thing,
It's that East Coast bias, the NFC East or the AFC East. I feel like we always start with, but I'm going to start with the West. And I'm going to start with the team that made it to the Super Bowl out of this division. This is a difficult team in some ways to do this for because they're so deep and they have so many talented players. By the way, relatively news is by the time this comes out, they did recently give an extension to Christian McCaffrey. It's similar to the extension for Justin Jefferson, in which the appropriate reaction is, yep, that's the best player at his position in the league. The interesting aspect there is more about kind of what it means for the rest of the team. But anyways, I don't think Christian McCaffrey is going to be your pick. I'm guessing here. Maybe I'm wrong. Who did you choose for the San Francisco 49ers?
So I'll preface this entire exercise by saying, in honor of the late Larry Allen, I did pick a lot of linemen, but they're not all offensive linemen. But I had to show love to a guy that I grew up idolizing and watching, just an elite athlete, an incredible player. Yeah. Gone too soon. But on that note, my answer is, it seems obvious, is Trent Williams. Trent Williams is, 36, 37, but has not had a drop off outside of his health from season to season. He's still the number one. He's OT1 for me. And in an offense that Kyle Shanahan runs and tweaks, that is so good at getting mismatches and getting balls in their players' hands in the right setting, whether it's Deebo Samuel, Chris McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. They've got weapons everywhere. This machine noticeably drops off when Trent Williams does not play. He is that big of an X factor, that big of a problem, both in the run scheme and in the protection. You see the help that they have to send to the left side when he's not playing. You see the drop off and actually the space of holes. Chris McCaffrey, when he's running left side, when Trent Williams is in, it's like driving a truck through there. You can see he's comfortable there. You can see that their statistics say that they lean left when Trent Williams was there. Doesn't matter the time, the distance, the down. They lean left when they run just because they see such an outsized return when they go that direction. And again, a precipitous drop off when he's not there. So Trent Williams is the guy for me until he proves otherwise. Until outside of him staying healthy, because he's had every now and then he'll have an ankle, a knee, things like that. But nothing that I think isn't in the natural flow of football. And so until I see a drop off, to me he's the straw that stirs a drink in San Francisco.
Yeah. I while you're talking, it just gave me the idea to look up the splits for the Niners. They averaged over a full yard more running to the left versus the right, which is a pretty dramatic split. There's still they go from, having 6.2 yards per attempt, which is second best in the NFL, to 5.2, which is still pretty good. Still a top 10 rate, but it's pretty dramatic. I think Williams is a great pick because not just because of what he does for the offense. And I think we all assume if he's healthy, he's going to continue to play at that level. It's a position where I think you could still play at a pretty high level, even in your 30s, but also because they don't have a lot of depth behind him, Marshall. I think that's what makes him so unbelievably pivotal to success for this team, which I think we agree is winning a Super Bowl, by the way.
Yes.
I think he is probably, this is kind of an interesting way of looking at it. The offense is like an all-star team. Yeah. Who is the player, if you took him out, would be the most concerning? You can make a case for Christian McCaffrey because of everything that they do and the way he completely transformed that offense, which I've talked about a lot. But I think Williams, it's arguably more dramatic because with the skill players, if you take out one, you can kind of reshape the offense, and these guys all have different skills. Behind him, you're looking at Jalen Moore. I'm looking at their depth chart right now. On the right side, they brought back Colton McKivitz, who's drawn a lot of ire from Niners fans over the years. Behind him, it's Chris Hubbard. They drafted Dominic Puni, who I think is playing on the interior, would play on the interior. I don't know necessarily.
He's bumping in.
So I think that's, to your point, like that's a problem. Like if he is clearly the best player on the offensive line, and I think along with the scheme and Purdy gets rid of the ball pretty quickly, covers up some of the deficiencies elsewhere on the line. My pick is actually also in the trenches, but on the other side of the ball. And it's another player who's very good, and that's Javon Hargrave. So here's why I went with Hargrave. The Niners' defensive line is not as deep as it's been in recent years. Eric Armstead is gone. He was pretty much a cap casualty as they make way to pay for everybody else. Javon Kinlaw, obviously up and down play from him, but he is gone as well. Lee Collins is in. They added some edge depth, Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, but the interior was a bit of a problem against the run last year. As good as Javon Hargrave was rushing the passer, and he was extremely good, this is a defense that really struggled to stop runs between the tackles, short yardage, finished 23rd in success rate versus the run as a result, 28th in third down conversion rate on runs. Now, some of that was structural. They played with a lot of light boxes, the fifth highest light box rate in football, but in my mind, like they need Javon Hargrave to be an absolute star. They're paying him like a star. And then when we look ahead, again, could go back to like success for this team, Super Bowl run, I see them going up against teams like Detroit that are so good running the ball again as a potential matchup. Green Bay is another good rushing team. And I think, okay, like that's, to me, it was arguably the weakness for this team last year. I thought they bowed up, in the Super Bowl. And it could be the weakness again. So that would be like the thing I would isolate as being a potential issue that could could prevent them from achieving the success that they need.
It's interesting. Like we've seen this shift, and not even a shift. It's like a rewiring of what we find important and what actually impacts winning at the end of the day. And for the longest time, it was always edge rusher, and that still is of the utmost importance. So they have Bosa, a guy that can help you finish games. But what we've seen with the dominance of the now retired Aaron Donald is the best teams at the end of the season with elite quarterbacks, the biggest factor is push up the middle. And Javon Hargraves is a guy that can provide that, and at times is a complete mismatch on the inside against guards who you would argue are a little less mobile, a little less athletic than tackles. And if you can offenses have found a way to mitigate pressure off the edge, whether that's all kinds of chip help, all kinds of screen game. There's a lot more things that they can do or that they're willing to do, especially leading up to the end of the games, which are sometimes, must passing downs. So they're running at you or they're making you the read if there's a zone element there. But a guy in the middle who can be dominant, who can have mismatches, provides you with less things to do. I remember us game planning for guys in the middle, and there was this, you can throw bodies at him, but if you're sacrificing bodies, then you'd have less on the edge. If you're not going to sacrifice bodies, then the mismatch gap is wider versus a guard and a center, to me, than a defensive end versus tackle with all the aliens we see coming to the league. And to me, a guy like Javon Hargrave can absolutely make a bigger impact if he shows up in those moments. We see the Philly game against Tom Brady that was Brandon Graham, but that was up the middle. That was getting pressure off of 3 technique. And so I think things are not completely moving in that direction, but you can see the impact in critical moments at the end of the games is up the middle versus on the edge.
Well, that brings me to the Rams and my pick. I'll go first. You mentioned the departure of Aaron Donald. That to me is sort of the, primary reason why I'm picking Kobe Turner. Second-year player, obviously was excellent last year. Led the rookies in sacks, had 12th overall league-wide in sacks created as well. And you could argue you got to play next to Aaron Donald and it must be just feasting off of single teams. Actually, not the true. He was really disruptive, I thought, against multiple offensive linemen, and I thought he was stout against the run too. But that said, life is very different without Aaron Donald. It's not just about double teams. It's about the way offensive lines, you can speak to this, set the protections, the way that everything is really game planned around stopping one player. And with Aaron Donald gone, it's a very, very young group. They drafted 2 players out of FSU, of course, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, part because they wanted to take a committee approach to trying to solve, or address the departure of Donald. Byron Young was good last year. But Turner, for me, is the one who jumps out as having that true star potential. And so I think whether or not this defense can be average, and I think all they need to be is average because I think the offense is going to be that good. Turner, to me, is the guy who jumps out as he's the guy who can be the star in this group.
Yeah, and I think that's a great pick. And not only will, the absence of Aaron Donald be felt within that position group, but he has such a trickle-down effect on the rest of the defense. He made linebackers' jobs easier. He kept, our job as offensive linemen was to get a body on a linebacker because oftentimes that's kind of all you needed. You need to get in his way first before you can do anything else, especially in the run game. Aaron Donald provided a lot more mobility for the second level. And then the third level, cornerbacks having to cover for less time because Aaron Donald was sitting in the pocket. And it wasn't always sacks. It was pressures. It was the quarterback knowing he was there, whether he's on your left side, right side, even. He started toying with people where he's like, I'm going to line up on the edge at defensive end because I can, because I want to, because there's a weakness here. And everyone had to pay attention to it. And you see the release rate for quarterbacks drop by significant amount of milliseconds, which we know in that actual metric means a whole lot. And so that affects corners in the way they cover, which the Rams have had good corners, but they've been made even better by Aaron Donald's presence, which I think we didn't take Aaron Donald for granted. We took the ripple effects that he caused for granted because that affected the entire defense and the game that is such margins. That has such an impact. So, a guy trying to replace him or by committee, whatever that looks like, you'll never be able to kind of really get to that same place without a Hall of Fame style player, but a guy that you mentioned that can replace him and provide some kind of pressure up the middle, some kind of game plan, sweat, as I call it, like anxiety when you're game planning for somebody means a lot. And so, and on that note, in the trenches, my guy on offense is Steve Avila. And there's a little bit of homerism there. He's a lineman, where I'm in alignment mode, but he's a TCU Horned Frog like me as well. But he's very deserving. He played left guard, I think, at a very high level for a rookie. He was thrown right in there. You can see the trust that Sean McVay had to put him in there. You can see him developing into a leader, and really had the trust again of Matt Stafford as well. They're shifting him, bumping him down to center, which he played in college, and he has the ability to snap. That's not something that should be taken for granted, but he has the ability. You give him an entire offseason, which was good. They gave him a lot of early just mental space to kind of make that transition, which is such a big unspoken about thing. And so I'm very excited to see what he can do. It's a whole different set of mechanics. Your feet are not staggered anymore. You're even. You're making more calls to the line. You're talking to the left and the right. There's the center quarterback exchange under center. There's shotgun snaps. All that stuff becomes mundane, but you have to work at them. And so him making that transition, I think he's having this entire offseason do. And again, it's a ripple effect. With that comfort comes, again, more trust for Stafford, who is playing at an incredible level for his age, and the chemistry he has with Puka Nacua. This team had such low expectations. They overcame them by such a wide margin. I can't remember a team who we thought was going to take such a drop off and overachieve. It was.
Oh, no, sorry to interrupt you, but like on this podcast, I'm pretty sure when I talked about this team last year and I was like, success for this team is just, like winning a few games or something. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it certainly wasn't, okay, who's the player who's going to put them over the edge on a playoff run or whatnot. Yeah, they're the king of outperforming expectations, the Rams. Avila is a great pick just because so much of that identity of that team now is built around that downhill, duo-centric power run game. And then they have the shotgun passing game where the ball comes out quick. And they've clearly made it a priority to defend or to protect Stafford from interior pressure, investing so much on the inside of that offensive line. I think, it's an offense. I'm doing the top 10 offenses pod. Spoiler alert, the Rams are very high. I'm very, very optimistic about that group. Okay, who do you have for the Seattle Seahawks?
Seattle for me is Reek Woolen. I'm going to go defense here.
Ooh, that's an interesting pick. Okay, get into it.
Well, listen, Seattle has been living off of reputation for far too long, on defense specifically. I played against the Legion of Boom, where in 2012, we had just come off in Green Bay. We had just come off a record-setting season with Aaron Rodgers with points, touchdowns, yards gained. We went into Seattle. That was the ultimate, Hail Mary game, officials, all that stuff. But we gave up 8 sacks. That defense was just something different in Seattle specifically, but just generally. And listen, you can never, duplicate that again. You had such a confluence of guys who were drafted lower. Richard Sherman switched positions. You had Michael Bennett. It was this weird amalgamation that made them special. I don't know if the expectations is ever get back to that level again, but the expectation is definitely not to rank 30th in yards per game given to the opponent. The expectation is definitely not to be 24th in opposing red zone touchdowns. And so they have come a long way from that. And I think we just kind of got to this point of complacency where we're like, oh, their defense will be good. It'll be serviceable at worst. And it's actually been bad. It's actually held the team back. And a guy like Reek Woolen, I think, will benefit a lot from Mike McDonald coming in. He's a big corner. He's coming his 3rd or 4th year. He's close to having a contract extension. He's on that level of player with a big body, loves to tackle. You can see the attitude. He embodies the Legion of Boom style more than any other player on that roster right now. And I think he's a guy you can build around at cornerback, putting him on the best wide receiver. And I think Mike McDonald's going to do a whole lot. He's allowed to do a whole lot because he's a guy you can put on the island. You can bring exotic pressures, simulated pressures, and you can believe that Reek Woolen will hold his own on the edge.
He's a really interesting player because he came out of nowhere year one and was so awesome in man coverage and such a ball hawk. And then last year, there were moments where he was in and out of the starting lineup a little bit. Still very good in coverage, but I do think body size hurt him a little bit in terms of stopping the run. And you draft Devin Witherspoon 5th overall. The reality is, and he played inside out. I'm very curious in seeing how Devin Witherspoon is deployed in this defense, however, because to my eye, I think the best version of it is when they're in their sub package and Witherspoon is inside, almost in that kind of Jalen Ramsey type role. But for that to happen, you need Woolen to be able to, consistently stay outside. And I think that's going to be like really pivotal, to what they can do in the back end. I'm also going defense, but I went in the front. And the player that I chose, pardon me, is Uchenna Nwosu, who is their best edge rusher. He was injured week 7, and his injury coincided with a very dramatic drop-off in this defense. Now, I say coincided because I think when you look at the splits, and they're really, really dramatic before and after, it would be unfair to put a lot of that on Nwosu because a very large portion of that had to do with the offenses, they were playing weeks 1 through 6. They had Rams, Lions, Panthers, Giants, Bengals. Obviously the Rams and Lions ended up being great and whatnot, but the Panthers, the Giants, the Bengals with injured Joe Burrow, not exactly world beaters. However, some things I think you can really parse out from that noise and really attribute to Nwosu. The Seahawks pass rush win rate fell from 7th with him to 28th without him. Their run stop win rate at the line of scrimmage went from 5th to 20th. And I do think his ability to set an edge was dramatically missed. I think Boye Mafe has been good against the run too, but he's just not as complete. And then Marshall, the other reason I picked him is because they have really invested in the interior of the defensive line. You draft Byron Murphy in the first round, who I love. You sign Leonard Williams to a big contract extension. You have Draymond Jones being paid a lot of money. They did not add at edge.
Right.
So I think they really need him to come back and continue playing at a high level because he's probably one of the more underrated players on the entire football team.
Yeah, I remember, I think he was with the Chargers a few years back, and I went against him in camp, and you can see a lot of twitch there. You're like, all right, there's something here out of USC, but he was still light in the pants. He was figuring out his body and how to even use leverage. And I'm like, okay, there's something here, but he has the prototypical size. He has what you want. And I think he's in a place that really unlocks guys like that, really unlocks another level, especially for pass rushers, especially when you get a home field advantage like Seattle. Like, he's in a place where he can thrive. And I think you're right about the injuries. That stuff matters. That context matters. And you hope he stays healthy and gets to be the full version of himself, because he can be an anchor on the side where you're like, all right, we don't have to worry about that side today. We can kind of fill. And I think Mike McDonald's going to do a lot of that just in the way that he creatively schemes things. I mean, he's going to have guys moving around. He's going to bring a lot of that Baltimore flair. That makes the actual mental part of the game hard on the offense. And that's going to, try communicating in Seattle. If you've been a fan in Seattle and you're trying to talk to the person next to you, try doing that with 10 other people on a field when stakes are high. And so you add all of that together, and these players have a chance above most other home field advantages to succeed. And the guy, the actual coordinator, the guy who's scheming things, adds to that. So I believe Uchenna also has a really good chance to be a really good pass rusher in this division that typically has a guy that, it's Bosa right now, but it's been other guys in the past of note who can close games. And they need him to be that. You're absolutely right.
I think we might have the same player for the Cardinals. I'm just guessing here.
Ooh, let's see it.
Do you also have Marvin Harrison Jr.?
No. So I went –
Really?
I did a little obvious game theory where I'm like, okay, that feels obvious. That feels like it's really going to be not easy to explain, but you're like, all right, everyone's going to pick him because day one, he was a pro last year. He was a pro playing at Ohio State. He was like –
love that, yeah.
Was it 2 seasons ago he was wearing an Apple Watch and he's wearing – like he wasn't there. Like, we know who his dad is. We've known for a while what he was going to be. And so I'll leave you to talk about that.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll let you talk about that. How about that? How about you?
Wait, now I'm very curious to see who you picked. Did you pick someone on offense?
Yes, I did. Or let's do a guessing game. Do you want to do a guessing?
I mean, did you go with an offensive lineman?
No, I didn't.
Okay. We'll put a pin on yours then. That's interesting. Okay, Harrison Jr. I love that you said he was a pro in college because that's such a good way to describe him. He just, I know I always said this, he just looked like a vet. Honestly, like he looks like a guy who's been training at an unbelievably high level. I saw a clip of Jonathan Gannon talking about him and saying they actually have to hold him back from practicing too much, which is coach speak a little bit. But I was like, no, like it's one of those things where with Harrison Jr., like I don't know, I can't speak to his work ethic. I haven't talked to people around him, but it shows up on tape He's just such a technician. And I think because of that, there's this expectation, and I think it's going to be very important that he plays at a high level immediately.
Yeah.
Because this is an offense where, the receiving group, he's immediately walks in as not only the unquestioned number one, the highest paid rookie receiver on the roster, despite being on a rookie contract. Obviously, he was picked at the top of the draft. Behind him, you've got, I thought, Michael Wilson, who showed some stuff last year, Zay Jones, Greg Dortch, actually kind of underrated guys. But there's just no doubt in my mind that he's going to be double teamed a lot immediately. And I got this from Matt Harmon's excellent reception perception site. Marvin Harrison Jr., he wrote, no other receiver who has been doubled on more than 8.5% of his routes, which was the case, hit a 70% success rate ever before Marvin Harrison Jr. So he's very accustomed to receiving extra attention from defenses. We saw that all the time at Ohio State. So I'm not worried. Like sometimes with rookie receivers, Marshall, they come in the NFL and I'm worried, this guy was in the slot in college, or he was, played with like another great receiver. I'm not worried about the situation that Harrison Jr. is running into or the expectations, because he has already showed he can do all of that.
Like that pick, but to me, it was like, all right, that makes a lot of sense. And to piggyback off that, yes, he's going to see a lot of attention. Who's going to benefit from that attention? So I thought about Michael Wilson for a little bit. I think he has a lot to prove. I don't think he's ready to be an X-Factor yet. But for me, it was Trey McBride. McBride
good. He's such a good player.
Is a good player, and like really is just like not talked about. I don't know why. I think because of the offense that we grew accustomed to with Kyler Murray and with Cliff Kingsbury, which is just like tight ends are an afterthought for the most part. But this new offense with Drew Petzing, like it's going to utilize tight ends. It won't be in a traditional way that he had in Cleveland with Stefanski, but there will be tight end usage, and there's going to be opportunities because Marvin he's going to get all the attention. We know that there will be balls that you force. He's so good. He'll get open regardless. But a guy like Trey McBride, who's kind of in that Zach Ertz frame where he's a pass catcher first. He had over 800 yards last year, and it's like a sneaky 800 yards. And you're like, and Kyler Murray wasn't there most of the time. So you're like, all right, what's going on here? And to me, he's a guy who stands to benefit so much from the attention that Marvin Harrison gets from Kyler Murray's resurgence. I think he still is going to be an electric football player. And as a safety blanket, you've got James Conner out of the backfield who can catch as a running back. But outside of the receivers, who else is Kyler going to feel like he could throw to when things just break down really quickly? They do have they're replacing a lot of snaps on offensive line with Paris Johnson, left tackle. But there will be moments where Kyler's just like he's going to want to use his legs, but he's also just going to dump it down. He's going to have to protect himself. And to do that, you have a safety blanket. There's a reason to call it a safety blanket. And Trey McBride is a guy like that who can catch. He'll get up the field as a tight end and still fall forward. He's going to get a lot of receptions just based off of being in this offense and making himself available after there's a double team on Marvin Harris on the outside and after a play might break down. And, oh, by the way, I think he's good enough to get things schemed for him by the offensive coordinator. So I'm excited to watch what he'll do in this offense and what exactly the offense will look like.
Yeah, I love Trey McBride. I have him on my dynasty team. He's like one of my most proud picks of the last few years. And he's just, I'm really excited about this Arizona Cardinals defense. I'll get into more detail on it when we talk about the NFC West, because I think that what they're doing is really interesting. They're really zagging where the NFL is zigging in some ways. I think they want to be this heavy personnel, run-centric offense. And I think under Drew Petzing, it sets them up to go up against a lot of defenses around the NFL who are a little bit lighter. Mm-hmm. And it creates mismatch opportunities for Trey McBride, who to me has the potential to be one of the 5 best tight ends in football. I truly believe that. I think he's really well-rounded. I think, he has legitimately good route running chops and hands. He's, like you said, a great target for Kyler and one who will definitely benefit from the attention paid to Harrison Jr. Okay, we're 30 minutes in and we're only in one division, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Okay. You go first for the Carolina Panthers. We're going to go to the NFC South now.
All right.
Who do you? There are 2 players though I thought about picking here. I'm curious to see if you take either one of them.
Oh, there we go. So I'm looking through my notes. All right, Carolina. For me, it's going to be Derek Brown. So they signed Dave Canales to be the head coach. I think he's going to do wonderful things. It's easier to do wonderful things when you're at the bottom. I think we simultaneously downplayed and like buried the Panthers organization and buried Bryce Young for no reason whatsoever. The actual nuance last year was completely lost. And I don't understand why. I'm getting into this business. I understand there's a need for like concrete stances to be taken, but it made no sense to me. Like I get he was struggling. That's stuff that they've had to claim ownership over, real things that needed to be fixed and pieces to put around him. Again, I'm talking about the offense, but Derek Brown, to me, a defense that was weirdly, their opponents' points per game were like almost dead last, but the games were closer than people can realize. I was actually there at the game when they beat Houston, and I was just like, the entire crowd was in shock. It was a 12-9
that game's kind of lost.
But they muddied the waters, and you're like, there's something here on defense enough to build on and be a scrappy team with a quarterback on a rookie contract, with the right coach, with the right energy. I think can be a team that contends, and what we know and acknowledge is a pretty weak NFC South. Derek Brown just got $63 million guaranteed. Is going to live up to that, and he's just a load. He's a guy that, just can plug the interior. I think they're going to use him in more creative ways. He makes, again, I'm one of those interior guys that makes you account for him. He's not necessarily a pass rushing prowess kind of guy. He's just going to bowl over you, which a lot of times is what's needed. But he's going to occupy two guys in the run game, and he's going to make you really, really pay attention. He's going to open up running lanes for linebackers, guys like Shaq Thomas to run through. They're going to miss Brian Burns a little bit, but he's going to provide another body for teams to have to deal with. He's a big load.
Yeah, I mean, he is the dude on this defense. One of the only dudes. But they were like, okay, we're building this around you, clearly with their financial decisions, moving on from Burns. And as you said, he has to be a superstar. He's been a good player and compensate for some of the issues around him. I went offense just because, to me, success for this team, their obviously expectations are not particularly high about them, is getting something from Bryce Young, showing some improvement over last year. And as you said, a lot of that, his struggles had to do with his circumstances. So I'm surprised. I thought you were going to go Ike Ekwonu because he had a really rough start.
It was my first pick.
And played a little bit better as the year went on. But I just keep going back to this. I talked about this last a couple weeks ago when I did the QB draft with Nate. Nobody was open ever in this offense. This is supported by a lot of stats. ESPN has the stat called Open Score. That's a really good way of looking at receivers' abilities to get open because it accounts for both the concepts and the position of defenders. So you're ruling out like separation, overprivileged screens, things like that. So the Panthers didn't have a single player who ranked in the top 32 in Open Score. Adam Thielen was their highest ranked player. And they traded for someone who consistently lands near the top and who was my pick. And that's Deontay Johnson, who over the last 3 years is actually tied for first with A.J. Brown in ESPN's Open Score. Now, Steelers fans are screaming, but he can't catch the football. And like, you know what? You can argue about catches and touchdowns and that kind of thing. My point is just this. They have a player now who is very good at getting open. And I think it's going to be pivotal in terms of determining, is this season a successful one for Bryce Young? So, okay. So I didn't go offensive line for the Panthers. I am going offensive line for the New Orleans Saints, who are kind of quietly, completely revamping a unit that used to be a strength on this team, but has been shedding talent. There's been injuries. There's been bad draft picks. And I'm going with the guy that they took in the first round this year. I'm doing another rookie here, and that's Talisa Fuanga, who we got one. Okay. Okay. You're the expert on offensive line play. I'll just start here. Derek Carr's splits with and without pressure are about as dramatic as it gets in the NFL. So pass protection is paramount for this offense. Fuanga is making the move from right tackle to left tackle. I have questions about that. I'm nervous about some of the other players on this offensive line. I know you've watched Fuanga. Like, how do you feel about him making that move, and why did you choose him along with me as being like the X factor for this team?
Yeah, I think the move from right tackle to left tackle was downplayed a little too much. It's a difficult transition, especially for a rookie. But he went to just an incredible situation. And in the past, I wouldn't have said that in New Orleans particularly. Listen, they played a lot of great years. championship level football with Teron Armstead. They tried to draft their way out of him signing with Miami, and I haven't been able to do that. So I'm excited about this pick. I also think it cannot be overstated that the signing of Clint Kubiak is going to be huge. The offense that he runs, like will want to run, is going to be very, very tackle friendly. There are going to be more zone reads, boots from this offensive line that you don't want to use Hyde, but really will just I call it just arbitraging pass rush situations, because over the course of an average 60 to 70 offensive snaps, the amount of times that you just give a defensive end, an edge rusher, a pure one-on-one pass rush, the more times you can decrease that in creative ways in the flow of your offense, the better you'll be, especially when there's a mismatch or you have a young guy or a guy who's switching positions. Your coaches who actually pay attention to that and are game planning for that, I think are the coaches that can give their guys a chance to succeed, especially you mentioned with Derek Carr and as he faces pressure. I think ever since he broke his ankle when the Raiders were kind of making their ascent, he's been a little bit of a different player with guys around his feet. And so minimizing that with a rookie tackle, I think you're trying to do everything you can to mitigate those opportunities. And again, I think he's got the physicality. They've got Ryan Ramczyk, who's had some injury stuff. It feels like he's tailing off a little bit. He's not a given. I love him as a player. I played with him briefly in 2019. We'll see what we get out of him. But if he's healthy, if he kind of can come to play and give the last bits of what I think he can play a lot. I think it's a matter of him wanting to, and in the tail end of his career. But again, Fuaga, I think, is in a really, really good situation in New Orleans with, I hope, and a coordinator who sees what he can do and won't just throw him to the wolves.
Yeah, we're waiting for the timeline for Ramczyk. I mentioned he might retire. There's talk about that. Penning might move. That's a big question mark. And but I love your point about Clint Kubiak and the tackle-friendly offense. The Bucs, to me, were one of the harder teams to pick. I don't know why. They're kind of running it back in a lot of ways on both sides of the ball. They brought back a lot of their players. Who did you choose for Tampa?
I don't want to get in a rut, but I chose another offensive lineman. I chose Tristan Wirfs. Listen, this guy came out. Yeah, this guy came out and publicly stated how difficult mentally and emotionally he thought it was going to be moving from right tackle to left tackle.
That's really
not something to take lightly from a man who is a mountain. And people who, there are probably people who are questioning his manliness or his mental fortitude. I'm like, I take
not
the
to
opposite.
his face, not to his face.
Of course, never always online. So I take the opposite. So you gave him a year to kind of get settled. I'm looking for him to take off. Listen, we've seen what he can do at right tackle. He felt very comfortable there. I would have liked for them to found a solution at left tackle and left him there. But listen, he's the best with tackles, especially for the blind side. You put your best guy there. Sometimes in college, sometimes you have less thick pieces to work with, but he's their best guy. So you put him there. You sign Baker to an extension, which is, I think, a pretty good value extension for what they got out of him and what they expect to get out of Baker moving forward. And you let Tristan Wirfs lock down his backside and really just get Baker in a rhythm. You could see them gaining momentum as the season went on, all playing as a group. You mentioned running it back with Mike Evans. They've got the keys, again, context of this division, which is getting better, but still is a division that's up in the air and it can be won. Tristan Wirfs is, yes, a first-round pick. He has to live up to that. But to me, at the left tackle spot, there's nothing that you can teach about like girth, for lack of a better term, and just size. And defensive coordinators know that he's a guy that you just can't send any rusher at. So that means maybe you're sending 5, 6, 7 more times than you might. And does that allow Baker to get guys the ball in space and make more? All this stuff is connected. And I think that comes from you being able to put Tristan Wirfs on the island. Not to mention, hey, big fella, we need 2 yards. Run it left. It becomes that simple at times as well.
Well, they do need to be a lot better running the football this year. So that's another thing that's really important. I went the other side, and I went with a second-year player who I liked what I saw from him in year one, and that was Kalijah Kancey, who was their first-round draft pick last year. He had some injuries. He was in and out of the lineup a little bit. But I thought he flashed the traits that made me like him so much as a prospect, and which is to say the burst, the ability to knife through gaps, his hand usage. He's a really creative rusher. if undersized, but he gets to play next to Vita Vea. But I would also argue he's very important to a pass rush that was really lacking. And it's been lacking for a while. 28th in pressure rate when they don't blitz. They obviously blitz a lot with Todd Bowles, but they have not really been able to replicate the sort of pass rush we saw in the Super Bowl run. Shaq Barrett's gone now. Clancy actually had the second most pressures on the team behind Shaq Barrett.
Wow.
And Yaya Diaby, you saw some flashes. I think Tryon-Shink, I'm kind of ready to call it as far as whether he can be like a dude.
Yeah.
Clancy to me is the player who jumps out as being like, okay, I think you have the potential to reach that sort of Grady Jarrett upside. I'm not saying he will, but if he does, that would go a long way towards helping this defense generate more of a pass rush and achieve success, which is, of course, winning the division again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's do the Falcons and then take a break. I'll go first here. I really was tempted to pick one of the pass rushers. It's like, beating a dead horse with the terms of the pass rush. But I'm going to stick with the offense. And I'm actually going with Drake London. Because I think for this team to have success, which for them is also winning the division, the offense needs to be very good. They need to, I would say, finish at least as a top 12 offense. And their ability to do so really, to me, does hinge in a great deal. A lot on London being the number one wide receiver. I think a lot of us, I know myself, believe he can be, but he hasn't been able to because of quarterback play. Now he has two quarterbacks, but he has one in Kirk Cousins, who I think is very good, in particular at making the types of throws, particularly over the middle of the field, deep middle of the field crossers that I think Drake London is very good at. Mm-hmm. And if he can make that leap, this offense can be very good.
Yeah, and I think they need to be a top 10 for sure offense, given what they have. And to me, Raheem Morris, I think he believes that and expects that. And so, I think you give Kirk Cousins two receivers, both with London and Kyle Pitts, with a giant catch radius. That's bodes well for him, especially coming off his Achilles. But for me, the pick is obvious. It's Bijan. And listen, we can lambast. I played for Arthur Smith. We can lambast him all we want for just misusing this arsenal of weapons. And there are a lot of reasons why that happened. I still think he's going to have a lot of success in Pittsburgh. I'll be following that. But I guarantee you, Zach Robinson is going to figure this out. He's going to find a way to make all these guys work and make defenses cater to every single one of them, which, by the way, you can't do. There's three of them. They added two, play making one-on-one nightmare kind of wide receivers, both in free agency and the draft. But Bijan, a running back who can run from the dot, run from the gun, catch from the dot, catch from the gun, split out wide, run and revert. He can do all that and paint your back ports, as he said in Friday Night Lights. He can do everything. And will they ask him to do everything? Maybe, maybe not. But you know that he can, and you know that with a Sean McVay-esque type scheme, there will be opportunities for him to do that. And whether it's screen game, slow screens off of their zone action, where they have a tight end going backside, there will be so many chances for Kirk Cousins just to give the ball to Bijan 5 yards from him and then run 60 yards. Good for Kirk Cousins, good for Bijan Robinson, good for the Atlanta Falcons. And so I think it's an obvious pick, but to me, we have seen such a fraction of what Bijan Robinson is capable of due to circumstances. I'm so excited to watch him in his offense. And they have it's an embarrassment of riches. There's going to be an actual task in getting everybody the ball to a sufficient amount.
Yeah, I know. I mean, until last season, we kept talking about this Falcons offense. Oh, positionless football, and they've got running backs who catch passes, and wide receivers who can block, and tight ends who split out wide. And then last year was a reminder, you can't really do any of that without good quarterback play. Yeah. So now the idea is if you have the quarterback, you can actually fulfill on the promise of Bijan Robinson, which is, as you said, a weapon who gets you mismatches, who you can put on the field and he can play a lot and do a million different things that confuse defenses. So we'll see if, and obviously that is the Rams' DNA as an offense is running unconventional concepts out of personnel groupings, which is to say, making everything look the same. So we'll see if the Falcons can actually do that. All right, let's take a quick break. come back and do the NFC North.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer: hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire.
Okay, we are back. Yes, the NFC East is last. I feel like maybe as a troll, I'll do the Cowboys last. Let's start with the Packers. You go first. This was one where I actually think we might have the same pick, but I don't know. Let's see.
It's Jordan Morgan. It has to be.
Okay.
It has to be just because that Green Bay is. I'll include myself in that. Has found such value in finding offensive linemen at different parts of the draft and replacing or slotting a guy in at left tackle with the ascent of Jordan Love in this offense last year. They can't allow themselves to miss a beat. They're on the rise, and the last thing you can handle right now is a lack of protection for your quarterback who is creeping into people's top fives. Like it's happening as we speak, and I think it'll be by the end of the season, deservedly so. I'm so excited for Jordan Love. This offense is also with Matt LaFleur built again in one of those offenses that is very aware and cognizant of how to protect new and young players. And I think, there was a bunch made about in the draft about Jordan Morgan's arm length. It's overblown. We've seen too many guys have success at tackle who didn't have long arms. It'll just come down to his fit and how he adapts as a rookie. We assume he'll win the job at left tackle. Again, that maybe not, but I think that'll be something that he's slotted for. And to plug and play with this Jordan Love offense that beat the Cowboys in the playoffs, I just think they have to this pick is going to fall a lot on Gutekunst about where this team is going to go. And they have so many other young weapons on rookie deals. Like it's incumbent that this guy performs or that you put him in a situation to succeed.
Would you say, and certainly the Cowboys have a case to be made here, and we'll probably talk about their offensive line at the end, but would you say that the Packers have been the best offensive line drafting team in the NFL of the last 5 years or so? I mean, because I'm looking at the depth chart. Morgan was their first round pick this year. You have Elton Jenkins, who was a second round pick in 2019. Zach Tom, who was a fourth round pick in 2022. Rasheed Walker was a 7th round pick, and he played at a decent level last year. I mean, it's amazing how often they've hit at this position.
It's them, Baltimore, and Philly, kind of in that top tier where they find value, and it's not always about the first round picks, as we know lineman is just a different position altogether, but they find value and fit, and they're rarely in positions where they have to overdraft or move up and draft a guy out of position. So yes, I'll put Green Bay up there.
So I went on the other side of the ball. I guess I'm no longer going to assume that we're the same unless it's an offensive line. No, I went with defense.
There, I appreciate it though.
I think Morgan's a totally fine, a reasonable pick. I guess for me, I'm putting probably a little bit too much stock in their ability to. I'm like, they'll be fine if Zach Tom has to kick out or Rasheed Walker. Like it feels like they consistently are able to just like move guys around and they're awesome. But defense has been to me the thing that's really held this team back. Although they have played better at the end of the season every year. They make the coordinator change. They bring in Jeff Hafley. But the big signing, and this was a very kind of uncharacteristic for the Packers signing, was giving Xavier McKinney, the free safety from the Giants, a 4-year, $68 million contract. Contract I talked about, I loved, but a contract he has to live up to for this defense to be good. We all assume, I think correctly, it's going to be a lot more single high under their new coordinator because that's kind of what he measures in. And you can't execute upon that unless you have like a true post safety, a guy who has the versatility, athleticism, and eyes that I think we believe McKinney, and we've seen at times the NFL, is capable of. So to me, with this coordinator change, with the expectations for this defense finally, delivering on the promise of all their first round picks, that signing really has to work out, particularly against, some of the higher flying offenses in the NFC. Okay, Lions. Something tells me you did not go offensive lineman for this team because
no.
I would seriously object to that because they are fine. I'll go first here. I went with Terrion Arnold. I was tempted by a player on offense who I'll mention, but Arnold, to me, like, this is a revamped secondary. Pass defense was the obvious issue with this team last year. Very good run defense, kind of flew under the radar. And then they had DJ Reader. They're going to be great up front. But the pass defense, particularly when they didn't get pressure, was just a nightmare. And they were constantly just triaging it, which is why they played so much less man coverage, which is what Aaron Glenn likes to do. But he could not last year because of injuries. So completely swapping things over. Carlton Davis, you trade for, you draft both Kerryon Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. I think Arnold, though, is the one who, he doesn't have to be a superstar day one because you do have some depth there, but you want him to show that ability to play in the NFL immediately outside, play man coverage, play press man coverage, because that's what they drafted him to do.
Yeah. No, I like that pick. And you lose a guy like Johnson Gardner-Johnson, who's kind of a spark plug, a guy that could do a lot of versatile things for them on defense in the secondary. I like that pick a lot. I did pick offense, but I picked Jameson Williams.
That was my second pick, Jameson Williams.
We have as a pro, we haven't seen him for a full season at full health. And at full health for a full season, I expect him to completely blow up. And I'm excited because not only did they find a way to keep Ben Johnson around, they re-signed their quarterback. So there's continuity and there's stability there for what is a very young and talented receiver. They still won't be a throw it around the yard team. They're going to be built on the run first. That's Dan Campbell's motto. But he's also a guy who I think prides himself on not being too much of a stereotype. He's like, if there's a mismatch, we're going to throw it. Like I think he loves attitudinally, is that a word? Jameson Williams as a receiver. Like he brings such an edge to him at receiver and can take a top off the defense. And as we've seen in the playoffs, they're not afraid to run him on end arounds and reverses and use him in creative ways on this offense. And he's just a man, 4.4 speed, coming off an ACL. On the turf, a lot of those home games, I mean, he's going to be hard to contend with, and I'm excited. The problem is going to be, will Jared Goff consistently getting the ball out on a lot of these deep routes he's going to run? Because he's going to run a lot of them, and they're going to throw a lot of them.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity there for someone like Jameson Williams. I'll get into this when I talk about the top 10 offenses a little bit, because I do think he's a great pick, because to me, like, this is an offense that was already awesome last year. And I believe even if you took Jameson Williams out, that they would still be great this coming year. But if he can be even 80% of what I thought he could be coming out of college, it adds such a dimension to this offense spatially. The ability to stretch the field, to create room, to work outside the numbers, which is not Jared Goff's specialty. There's just a real opportunity there. And he's flashed, but it's just been glimmers. And I loved hearing Dan Campbell talk about him, because it got me excited, and I believe him when he talks. So I don't think he's the type of guy who single out a guy for no reason. Okay. Moving on. Chicago Bears. Might have the same one here.
Defense?
No. Okay.
Oh, wow.
I went offensive line here.
Right.
You go first.
Me,
defense. Defense is good.
It's Montez Sweat. And he had such a resurgence, and I don't know if it was a change of scenery. I don't know if it's motivation, just, things didn't work out in his first place, and guys get a little bit of spark, a little bit of edge when they're dealt, especially midseason. And his, did he get his option exercised as a first round pick?
I think when they traded him, I mean, they did the deal. They extended him.
That's right. He got an extension. He
got a big extension after the trade. I don't know if he was playing. I think he might. Yeah, no. If I remember correctly, I believe Washington picked up his option and not. Okay. Yeah,
not Chase's.
I might be misremembering it, but point is, the Bears did give him a big extension.
Yes,
and he did not add anyone else.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate it. Polls, I guess. But no, I like what they're doing there. But he just tore things up the second half of the season. I mean, for a Bears team that was really just flailing, and we were already talking about about the first round pick being a quarterback, and who would it be? Oh, it's probably going to be that old guy out of USC, which I think is going to be a problem for the NFC North. Montez Sweat was winning one-on-one matchups. He was finishing games. He was causing a lot of pressure, and doing it at a rate that we anticipated him coming out of college that just didn't fully materialize in Washington. I played against him in 2019 when I was with the Patriots, and you could see he was still thinking a lot. And they had their own issues there as an organization, but there was a lot that he was still processing. And so he feels like he has a new lease on life. His energy is better. His consistency and technique is better. You can see on the edge, he's got a plan when he comes off the line of scrimmage with his hands, with his feet, setting up offensive linemen. So I'm excited for him for a full season, a full camp, to see what they can do, because they're a team I think that's in a building mode. They're a couple years off, but they have the quarterback, I believe.
Yeah, it's a good pick. So I kind of snarkily said this, but they didn't add to the defensive line, really, right? And they could have. They took Rome Odunze at 9. Great pick. However, there was an opportunity there to add to a defensive line that vastly improved with the trade for Montez Sweat, completely transformed their defense in some ways. But unless Sweat continues to play at the level, which is why I think it's a pick, could have trouble generating pass rush, because otherwise you have Walker, who's pretty good. They need those defensive tackles on the inside to be better, but they don't, Ngakwe's gone. They need Sweat to be a star for that defense to continue playing the way they did. I went offense just because for me, I know there's a lot of expectations for the Bears as like potential wildcard team. I hear that, but I really think success this year is just Caleb Williams looking like the guy we expect him to. And for that reason, I went with Braxton Jones, who is their starting left tackle. It's his 3rd year. He was a 5th round pick, so it's a big year for him contractually. ESPN has always been kinder to the Bears offensive line with their win rate stats than
in Chicago.
Yeah. So ESPN, again, I'm just presenting this pass block win rate, which is basically did a guy win in 2.5 seconds or less, right? They have him 5th in pass block win rate amongst tackles, like above like Andrew Thomas. And so I'm not saying I personally do not think Braxton Jones is a better player than Andrew Thomas. I'm just saying that. However, the ESPN metrics are very high on him, and the Bears are high on him too, because they continue to, they believe he is their starter at left tackle. So I think that's a belief that has to be rewarded for Williams to be the guy that we think he is capable of being, because it's obviously, as important a position as any in that process.
Absolutely. I like that. Listen, I believe in what Ryan Poles is doing. And so even if they don't solve all the problems in 1 year via draft and free agency, I think they have a real plan that really hasn't been present in the House Hall for, let's call it decades. As a Green Bay Packer, I'm allowed to kick a little dirt on Chicago Bears, but I do like Ryan Poles. I like what he's building, and I do believe they have a plan. Okay,
can you guess my pick for the Minnesota Vikings?
Let's see.
It's a little against type. I'll give you a hint.
A little bit type. Oh, okay. They've got, everything on offense is kind of settled outside of quarterback. I think it's a pass rusher.
You could definitely go with a pass rusher. You could definitely go with Turner. My pick is actually Aaron Jones.
Okay. All right.
Here's why. So success for me for the Minnesota Vikings is JJ McCarthy looking capable. I kind of feel like that's true of any team with the 1st round rookie quarterback. Yeah. I have no questions about the Vikings skill group. It is awesome. Justin Jefferson it was correctly paid. Hawkinson, Addison, amazing. However, there's this kind of feeling about JJ, and I've articulated this. He walks into this great situation. It's similar to Michigan. He's under center, play action, boot, but Michigan, of course, had a dominant rushing attack, and the Vikings did not last year. 27th or the year before, by the way, back, before they traded Dalvin Cook, or they parted ways with Dalvin Cook, 27th in run DVOA, 28th in rushing yard over expected per carry, which is more about the backs. So they move on from Alexander Madison after moving on from Cook. And after Jones is surprisingly cut from the Packers, they signed him. I love this because he to me is a perfect fit for what they want to do on offense. The Vikings use amongst the second highest, under center rate of running the football in the NFL. Aaron Jones last year, yes, he battled some injuries, but he under center was 5th league wide in success rate running the ball. if he can walk in and play at that level like he did in Green Bay, like he has in Green Bay in this scheme, which I feel like is perfect for his skill set, I think it will go a long way towards making life easier for JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Listen, I like that pick a lot. And my pick is, let me explain. So it is Sam Darnold, but it's because
Oh, I like this.
What we saw with CJ Stroud, to me, is we cannot forget that is an outlier. That situation, that level of performance from a rookie usually doesn't happen. And so my preferred wish would be for Sam Darnold to play well for 7, at minimum 8 weeks. And then for things to be a little bit easier, because as we've shown with the Jordan, I think there are more instances of Jordan Love's working situationally, meaning sitting for longer than you're thrust right into it, than for CJ Stroud's working, especially long term. I'm talking long term. And so I get that you draft JJ McCarthy, you go up to get him. He's going to be the guy. I wish, this is just my fantasy world, I wish that Sam Darnold would have a chance, because Kevin O'Connell, O'Connell is, I believe in him so much as far as giving quarterbacks a chance to succeed. I think that they could make this work because of all the weapons around them. I think they could be a competitive team. They don't have to punt on the season to do that. And then you have a quick trigger, because we've seen Sam Darnold not, live up to the hype of him as a first round quarterback. He's not your long-term solution. There's no doubt about that. But for me, that is a situation that I would love for JJ McCarthy to get the chance to sit, because I think he has glaring issues that I'm hoping aren't exposed and that create bad situational stuff for him moving forward. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Off the ledge a little bit?
Well, I think you hit on something that is going to be, I think it's like a little bit of an under the radar storyline, which is this is a very big summer for JJ McCarthy. Sam Darnold is making very high end backup money. And as you said, JJ McCarthy has not played that much. Like he was like the small sample size guy. So there is absolutely a world in which he doesn't start week 1, even though I think a lot of us, and myself included with my explanation there for Jones, are kind of assuming he plays next year. But he's one to watch this summer, because if he looks like he's struggling and Darnold plays well, it would be totally plausible for Darnold to play. So that's definitely one I've got my eye on. All right. NFC East.
Everyone's waiting on it.
Let's start with the New York Football Giants. Who are you picking?
New York Giants. I'm back to my wheelhouse. I'm going offensive line. I'm going Evan Neal. Evan Neal recovery. Huh?
Is he starting?
I haven't checked in on OTAs.
I think the assumption is he is. Sorry, I was just starting there because another guy who's going to be a pivotal summer.
Yeah, and if there's a hot seat, his ass is on fire. Not only because of what he said after, I forgot what week it was, what game it was, in that New York media, just calling people, the whole plumber situation, and that reeks of privilege. Is like, you can't say that. He's since apologized, but his game. Let's talk about his game. He's got so much to overcome right now, and he's got the size. When he came out of Alabama, I love the pick. I thought they were building, bookend tackles for 5 to 10 years in New York, and he just hasn't stepped into that role yet. And so much of it is just technique and conditioning based. He's out of position way too often. He's slow off the ball way too often. And again, I talked about that with Tristan Wirfs. Guys that size who are that thick, half the battle is getting off the ball on time and getting to your spot. You win 70 to 80% of pass reps when you're to your spot, especially when you're that size. Then come the hands, then come the feet, and then knowing, situational and stuff like that. But he's got the tools, and you're just like, man, please put it together. You've got what it takes. This New York Giants team, which I think is going to struggle this year, but the offensive line could be could be an anchor for the team. And we've seen lesser teams have success with offensive lines who could push people around, shorten games, run the ball a little more. Dayball's still going to be creative. He's still going to find ways to get guys open, but they need Evan Neal to kind of come through. They need him to move people around in the run game. He's too big not to, but again, he's up against it right now, a guy who has fallen so short of his billing, being drafted out of Alabama.
I have a question for you. Going off of that a little bit, I'm just looking at something right now. If so, the Giants took my pick, who's Malik Neighbors, number 6, and I'll explain why in a second. If the Chargers had traded down, let's say a team had tried to jump the Giants for quarterback, I guess Penix or whatever. Anyways, if Joe Alt was still on the board, do you think the Giants should have taken Joe Alt? Would have taken if they? Would you have encouraged them to take Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors?
I would have. Yes, because I think the difference, especially if now that we know that Daniel Jones is like where they're putting chips at, you're like, yes, weapons. Obviously, you want more weapons for Daniel Jones, but what has he struggled with? That it's been turnovers, it's been ball security, and a lot of that comes from comfortability in the pocket, and that comes from pass protection. And so, I would have, and maybe that's just my personal bias, I would have approved the pass protection first. But I get Malik Neighbors is going to also give him someone that a little outlet that he can get the ball to that'll improve this Giants offense. But I think, listen, they're behind. They're kind of swimming a little bit. I'm not sure where they're going. And if Daniel Jones doesn't perform, you're just, man, you're looking at yourself like we had so many opportunities, so many routes we could have gone in this draft, whether it's quarterback or playmaker or offensive lineman, and we took the playmaker, but there are other holes that we probably could have filled.
I mean, that's kind of what with Neighbors is just like, because it is such it's a high draft pick to spend on any player. And obviously we've seen receivers just one who went above him in this draft, but the opportunity cost here of not going quarterback, or I guess, with all off the board offensive tackle, wasn't quite as obvious, but they could have traded down, whatever. Point is, it's a lot. A lot is riding on Malik Neighbors being that dude. Loved him as a prospect. I am fascinated to see how he's used, because this is a very slot-heavy receiving group.
Yeah.
They have to find a way to get the most out of him. They have to find a way to get him involved in explosive plays with a dubious offensive line, and then a quarterback who has not pushed the ball downfield. Some of that due to factors outside of his control. So I think for me, it's just kind of like, okay, Malik Neighbors has to be the star for this. That's for this team to feel good about the draft in this year. Can he, in the context of this offense? Because if Malik Neighbors was on so many other teams, I think it would be a lot easier for me to just see the path. I think that it's totally plausible here, but that is sort of an X factor for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go Cowboys next.
I went obvious just because they have so many holes, but the defense, I went Micah Parsons.
Really? That's not obvious at all. I thought you were going to say Tyler Guy.
He's already a game changer, X factor. But when you rewatch the playoff game against Green Bay, they had holes everywhere. And so ultimately he can't do that. He can't draft guys. He can be on his show talking about who he wants to sign on his podcast or whatever. But ultimately, he's going to have to be an Aaron Donald type of guy, which he was on the way to being. Which requires people around him, but he's going to have to take his game to another level, which can he? Because they, again, stood pat in so many areas in free agency when they said, quote unquote, we're all in. Well, they, as in Jerry Jones said, we're all in, that so much more is going to be put on his back, on his shoulders. And so he is already an X factor, but he is, to me, an X factor on a defense that was the ultimate Achilles heel. Listen, they've got issues with Dak. They're trying to figure out how to pay him. They're trying to figure out how to pay CeeDee Lamb. He's eventually going to want his money too, sooner than later. But he's a guy that I think he's going to have to do more than his position requires, which is unfair. But that's what they pay him money.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. He's a guy who a lot of conversation about offenses and the playoffs, but even out of the playoffs. Trying to minimize his impact as a pass rusher by running at him or, working away from him. And he has that ability to completely take over football games, but you want him to do that regardless of what the offense is doing. You want him to dictate rather, right? So I went with offense, and I went with Tyler Guyton, who I believe he is starting at left tackle. He has one if I'm not mistaken, career start in college at left tackle. He mostly played on the right side.
Yeah.
Mostly, though, being a bit of an overstatement because he is fairly raw coming out of Oklahoma. He doesn't have a lot of starts. And he, this is an offense that doesn't, to my eye, really protect the offensive linemen. You talked about the Saints and Kubiak, and I think the Packers offense we can talk about actually does a lot to protect their offensive linemen. Cowboys have a pretty, traditional drop back passing game. You got to go in there and you got to, Tyler Guyton is going to be asked to go out there on an island and protect Dak Prescott's blind side. Week 1, Myles Garrett.
They live with the Tyron Smith security company for a decade plus, and it's going to not be the same level of comfort that they're used to. I would like to think Mike McCarthy, especially with what we assume is his job on the line, will not let that be the thing that derails drives and games. But again, what else have they shown us but that? And so there's going to be a lot of pressure on a guy who is very raw. I like that they get to keep Tyler at left guard, Zach Martin, Tyler Smith, Zach Martin gets to stay comfortable. Terrence Steele is coming back. So there's continuity there. So it won't be that there's holes everywhere, like gum on a boat that they're trying to plug. And so you'd like to think they'll slide more his way. They'll give him some chip help. But yeah, the learning curve is going to be so steep. We'll find out because, there'll be everyone in Oxnard. Are they going to Oxnard or are they back in Frisco?
I'm not sure, actually.
He's going to I imagine there'll be some fights. There's going to be, people are going to be trying him and poking him to see what do we have in this left tackle. And I like that pick for X Factor.
So I'm going with a lot of second-year players. I've noticed that. And I guess that's because I'm more comfortable saying this player has to break out or whatever.
Yeah.
The Eagles I'm choosing a player who already broke out, but feels a little forgotten, maybe because of the implosion of the team down the stretch. And that's Jalen Carter, who was unbelievable early on. And then, there was a little bit of a tail off towards the end of the season. And I think that's meaningful. There's a lot of stats. I was looking at defensive line stats. One thing that jumped out to me, average get off, which is NGS, 0.86 seconds, only behind Chris Jones on the interior of the defensive line.
Right.
He was as advertised. Now, the reason I chose him, Marshall, is, and this is kind of shocking to say about a Philadelphia Eagles team, not a lot of depth behind him now.
Right.
We think of this defensive line as being so deep, but, obviously Cox is retired. You're looking at, you need Jordan Davis to continue playing more reps. And they did add to the edge. You bring in Bryce Huff, bring back Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith on the edge. But on the inside,
not much on the interior.
So I think Jalen Carter, for this Eagles defense to be better, and there's a lot going on, he has to be the star he was, particularly in the first half of the season. And it's something I think he's very capable of doing. Yeah,
no, definitely. And, it's kind of been this weird stock market thing with him where you get the fall off with this pre-draft stuff at Georgia. Teams questioning, was he in shape and is he prepared? Is he mature? To then the performance where you're like, oh, he's at, like you said, as advertised, to now I think he's trying to find his way. And they need him to find his way because there's, again, not much behind him. And the defense that is so reliant on defensive line pressure, just bringing guys in waves and waves and waves at you. And so my guy is a guy across from him in the trenches, and it's the replacement of a Hall of Famer. Congratulations, Cam Jurgens. Step on up. You got to replace a Hall of Famer who is now more famous than your quarterback, and it was also just a wholly unique specimen at his position. They just don't make guys like him. Literally a fullback, converted to center. Super, super smart, charismatic leader, master of the tush push scrum. And so those are big shoes to fill. They will find ways to help him out. They won't be able to do the same things. Jason Kelce was a center that you could block down on and pull around to the edge and expect results and do it on a regular basis. And that's just not something you see very often. And, again, in screen game, how many times did you see him out in space on linebackers and safeties, throwing and cutting and making lanes? And so to me, that's a big ask, but I think Cam Jordan is up to the task, but we will find out. Especially because there's pressure now on Jalen Hurts about what did we pay for? Where did we see the heights of the Super Bowl participating quarterback to now last season, where we might have seen a drop off, where a return to the mean a little bit. And so you need stability at a center position where, they converted so many third and fourth downs with the tush push. We laugh about it because it was crazy. It made a mockery of the rules a little bit, made a mockery of QB sneaks, but that was their go-to. That's like having Cam Newton in college for third and fourth and short. Like, it was just an automatic thing. Can they replicate that? Saquon Barkley will help with the quad father. But, that's such a wholly unique thing from the center position to burrow and drive your legs. And it was the thing that only they could do. Teams mimicked it, and they just couldn't do it to the same clip.
Well, it completely affects everything they do on offense, knowing if you're fourth and short, you're going to do that. And if you can't, you got to completely change the way you approach play sequencing, everything. And the push has always been funny, right? Because we're always, it's a little unclear who gets the most responsibility for the success of the Eagles watching it, in part because it's just like, but yeah, you're taking out a key factor of that equation, and we're going to see if they can they still do it at a high level? Will they try to do it at a high level? And then the other thing, with him and that offense, the center sets protections. Jalen Hurts really struggled against pressure last year, against the blitz in particular. Kellen Moore is going to be leaning on Juergens to help solve that problem too, as well as Hurts. So it'll be I think that's a really good choice and a really pivotal position. Okay, we were wrapping with the Washington Commanders. Did you go offensive line all?
No.
Okay, so I went offensive line here for the Commanders. Who did you have for the Commanders?
I have a rookie who, to me, coupled with the new coordinator, and by the way, Cliff Kingsbury's back. Cliff Kingsbury, offensive coordinator. Luke McCaffrey. They've drafted.
This is officially your most hipster pick.
Is it really? Okay, fine. That's fine. I'm okay with that. My brother went to Rice. Maybe that's the connection there. But listen, Cliff Kingsbury is still going to be Cliff Kingsbury. I don't know if we're going to get this new version that uses two tight ends a bunch and wants to bring in a fullback on third downs. That's just not him. And so you couple him with Jaden Daniels, which I'm actually excited about. It won't be a boring offense. We'll see if it's going to be a good offense. It won't be a boring offense. And you've got Terry McLaurin already. And I think Luke McCaffrey was a prospect that usually this like nepotistic angle where it's overplayed. We can't assume a whole lot. He was under the radar and should have been a higher lauded pick just because he played at Rice. But I see so much a toughness and ability in his game that translates to the NFL. Tough catches, mismatch. I play with a guy named Jordy Nelson who we call the white man's speed burden, where guys just assume that this guy's not going to run by me, and then he does for years and years and years to an incredible career. I think Luke McCaffrey is on that trajectory. We'll see how he's used, but I'm excited about the possibilities there because he won't be looked at in a game plan, and it'll be week 4, 5, 6, and we're like, if you play fantasy, you're like, hey, there's some targets here. There's some catches here.
I appreciate you giving him some shine. Respectfully, probably disagree with this one. He's
so nice right now. I think you can lay into me if you need.
All right. Well, I like McLaurin. I'm higher on the Dotson than some. Good run game. Not to be a broken record, but the offensive line is just my biggest concern about this Washington Commanders team. It's my biggest concern about Jaden Daniels, who played behind a brick wall at LSU. And so I wrote down Brandon Coleman, who was their 3rd round draft pick, who I'm sure you can speak to his abilities. Yeah, but it could be Cornelius Lucas, who they did sign to a couple of years, who's a veteran. One of those players is going to start at left tackle, protecting Jaden Daniels' blind side. If that position is disastrous, I think it has the potential to derail his rookie season. So you want to get competent play out of one of those players. I don't know who's going to win. You probably know more about Lucas Coleman, than me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to, give an uneducated take on him. He was 3rd round draft pick, but that is the position that I am eyeing with great interest.
Yeah, I think I've been zigging and zagging just to keep people off my scent a little bit. But yeah, offensive line and Brandon Coleman specifically. They draft. So pre-draft, people were saying he's a guy who kick in. He's, not the prototypical height of a lineman, but he's got the strength, athleticism, the experience. So they're like, oh, guard. But the Washington Redskins came out and said, we see this guy that can play tackle. Excuse me. Huh?
Commanders, sorry.
Sorry. Excuse me. Man. So I think they see him as a versatile guy that could solve a couple of problems. And we'll see how camp goes. And at TCU, he was a guy who played guard, played right tackle, and then eventually settled in at left tackle and is capable at all three. Incredible metrics at the combine, an elite athlete, truly at the offensive line position. And I agree with you, wholeheartedly. I was trying to do, my lineman a service, but not make this just a lineman love fest because, there's no one out there doing it. But yeah, I agree with you. Jay Daniels, I'm excited about him kind of as not the most talked about rookie quarterback because if at his height, I think he could be better than all the other top guys if he plays to like his potential. And so getting him in the position to do that between Cliff Kingsbury and the rest of this offensive unit, I think is going to be a big deal. And again, we have to center ourselves. Let's just do a little about rookie quarterbacks and the odds of what they will look like. And we have all the excitement in the world and he has all the tools to do it, but the CJ Strouds just don't happen that often. And so temper expectations, but I really want him to be protected and given the best chance to succeed.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why with both of the rookie quarterbacks in the NFC, Daniels and Caleb Williams, who we assume are going to start, I went with the left tackles because I'm just like, dude, like, that I just saw Bryce Young experience playing behind some very sus pass pro, something we've obviously seen that's the fastest way to ruin a rookie season is, and with Young, I think he was doubly hit by both guys who couldn't get open and he did have pass protection. It was awful. Yeah. So I'm hoping for better for Daniels, who at least has the benefit of playing with good skill players. So he's got that going for him. And we'll see. I'm very, to me, a lot does rest on offensive tackle play for this Washington Commanders team. Marshall, tell folks where they can find you and find your work. This has been very fun.
I'll be on this fall on Sirius XM Big 12 Radio, and hopefully you see me more, on your local football stations calling games. That's the plan. And follow me on social, Twitter at mnewhouse73 and Instagram at mnewhouse73. I'll be doing some O-line breakdowns here. I'm putting some stuff together, so I'm actually, becoming a professional, trying to act like one of those.
Well, hopefully we'll see you back on this program once the season starts.
Anytime. Thank you.
It was great having you today. Thank you, as always, to the fine folks at Omaha Productions, the producers of this show, Kirsten Sobecki, our fearless leader, Owen Saylor, Anthony Jimenez, Jack Foster. You can catch this on ESPN2 on Wednesdays now. Marshall, if you want to DVR that, or at youtube.com/Mina Kimes. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit subscribe. If you're listening to this podcast, you can listen ad-free at Amazon Music. Subscribe, rate, and review. We'll be back next week.